Hello and welcome to Press TV News Analysis. I'm Kaveh Taghwayi. The year 2009 had shown a promise as the beginning of a new era in the United States, but it remains to be seen if the chance of yes we can will drown out the drone of business as usual in Washington. No, not the deadly U.S. drone attacks in Pakistan, which may possibly be U.S.'s next war. Enter the third party, an alternative voice that speaks to reason rather than the Republicans or Democrats. But when all said and done, would they amount to one of the same?
The U.S. politics has long been dominated by only two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. There are many other parties in the U.S. The Libertarian Party and the Green Party are among the old ones, and the Pirate Party is an emerging one. But none of these parties can really have an effect on the two main parties, nor have a chance to win an election. Third parties can at most act as spoilers by taking votes from one of the two major parties. Now, with the 2012 election season quickly approaching, a new poll shows a majority of Americans are fed up with the traditional two-party system and want a third independent party. The poll, conducted by Gallup, shows a majority of Americans think both Democrats and Republicans have failed to represent the American people. Gallup found that a significantly higher percentage of Republicans than Democrats are in favor of a third party at this point in time. Democrats and Republicans don't look the same on the surface, but many say they don't differ much when it comes to major issues, including economy and the country's foreign policy and its wars. It won't matter who is leading the US when, for example, it comes to supporting Israel. Domestically speaking, any US president will give his or her backing to corporate America and the Wall Street. But a lingering question is, how will a third party be able to afford to rival and challenge the Democrats and Republicans?
Democrats and Republicans hold a monopoly on the electoral process. They hold this through law, and in fact they use government monies to enhance their parties in question. This is detrimental to securing the public interest, but there's not too much that people can do about it other than respond to a poll expressing their dissatisfaction.
Let's try to find out why Americans are disillusioned with their current political system. Our guests for this news analysis include Executive Director of If Americans Knew, Allison Ware, who joins us from Los Angeles, California. We have a former U.S. Senate candidate, Mark Dankoff, who joins us from San Antonio, Texas. And rounding up our guests, author and investigative journalist Dave Lindorf, who joins us through Skype from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Thank you all for joining us in this news analysis. First question to Mark Dankoff. Let's reflect on this recent Gallup poll, Mark Dankoff, which finds that the majority of Americans support a third major political party to challenge the traditional two-party system. Why do you think most Americans feel the need for a third major political party?
Well, I think it's abundantly clear, as your report identifies, corporate interests, Wall Street interests, and Zionist interests bankroll and control both of the major parties in this country. And what we have is a situation, however, where, as your report has also indicated, there are certain hurdles to any third party becoming successful in providing an alternative. One is the amount of corporate money that backs both the Republican and the Democratic parties. The second is ballot access laws and the way in which those laws are written by the Republican and Democratic Party state legislatures in a way that effectively keep third parties off the ballot in many of the 50 states. And then the third is the fact that if you had an effective third party and an effective third party candidate, they would be denied much media coverage because the same forces that control Wall Street and that control the corporate system in the United States economically own these major news media outlets and are effectively going to keep a third party, right, left, or center from getting the kind of coverage that it deserves.
Allison Ware, let's reflect more on this Gallup poll. There's quite a bit in it, and this one has asked the respondents the following question. In your view, do the Republican and Democratic parties do an adequate job of representing the American people? Or do they do such a poor job that a third major party is needed? This question directed at you, Allison Ware.
Well, this is, I think, as the previous speaker said, a great many Americans across the political spectrum are extremely unhappy with the current political situation in the United States, especially the fact that we continue to be involved in foreign wars that most Americans don't think we should be involved in, that our budget is out of control, that there is the government grows larger and larger, and most people are not happy about that. So you find both liberals and conservatives dissatisfied with a great deal that is going on. I think there's much more common ground among Americans from the Democratic Party and from the Republican Party than our media let us know. There's, it's reported always as a very adversarial kind of situation where all liberals are supposed to be against all conservatives, and all conservatives are supposed to be against all liberals. But you find movements that are growing, of growing significance. For example, the Ron Paul movement, where you find, even though it's largely begun by people who would be identified as traditional conservatives, anti-interventionist conservatives, a great many disaffected Democrats are also very excited about this movement and have joined it as well. So I think this Gallup poll makes sense to me. I'm not surprised to see that so many people are unhappy with the two parties the way they're currently operating.
Let's get an answer from Dave Lindorf. Dave Lindorf, same question to you. In your view, do the Republican Democratic parties do an adequate job of representing the American people, or do they do such a poor job that a third majority party is needed?
Well, they do such a poor job that not only is a third party needed, but they're going to desperately try to prevent there being a third party, which is what they've been doing for years and fairly successfully. I mean, just look at what happens with something like Ralph Nader trying to run a third-party campaign for president. The media, which is all licensed by the federal government, which is run by the two parties, bar him from being involved in any debates. So even though people want to hear him and want to get a broader perspective on what is happening and what the issues are, the media blocks these people out, and they simply don't have any access to the public, short of retail campaigning where they have to go and talk to each person. But you can't really do that in a country of 300 million people. Okay,
Mark Dankoff, you mentioned three factors: corporate factor there, Wall Street, and Zionist interests. What is there to say that any presidents, well, we can go back some presidents, it seems like these are some of the three common features of presidencies. So what would there be indicative of them breaking away from these three? And also curious why Zionist interest would rank as one of the top characteristics of a presidency.
Well, all you have to do in terms of the Zionist interests is look at the latest numbers released by the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs by Janet McMahon in terms of Israeli Political Action Committee money going into the candidacies of major party candidates in both houses of Congress as well as the presidency. It's a staggering amount of money. If the American people could see the amount of money that is being devoted to these Zionist-backed candidates and the way in which these candidates are handpicked, not simply by the significance of the particular races that they're running in, either in the U.S. House or in the U.S. Senate, but look at the committee assignments of these people once they're elected. When you're looking at defense and foreign affairs and appropriations and banking, one discovers that these are the candidates that are handpicked by the Zionist lobby, not only to win elections, but to gain certain committee assignments in both houses of Congress in order that the type of foreign and domestic policy that we've had out of both the Republican and the Democratic parties continues. As far as the presidential races are concerned, the last couple of American presidents that showed any degree of independence whatsoever from the Zionist lobby were Dwight Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy. Since Kennedy's assassination and the advent of Lyndon Johnson, every American president that has followed Johnson has seemingly been even more in bed with the Zionist lobby and with these Israeli governments than his predecessor has been. And when you look at this whole issue of Zionist and corporate control of American politics, just look at Barack Obama's old Senate seat in Cook County, Illinois. That was won last time out by Mark Kirk, a Republican, who presumably in terms of banking interests and foreign policy will look exactly the same as Barack Obama did when he held that Senate seat. This is just an example and a microcosm of the larger issue, one that, of course, Allison Weir has identified many times at If Americans Knew.
Okay, Allison Weir, can you please replay that for us in terms of the same line of thought that Mark Dankoff was talking?
Well, these are such important comments, and this is exactly what's going on. For example, during the last election, there was a debate that was broadcast, I think, on C-SPAN or some alternate TV broadcast media that almost no one saw. But I had the opportunity to see it online, between Ralph Nader and Chuck Baldwin. Ralph Nader from, I don't know if he was the Green Party or what party he specifically was with, but a very liberal party. And Chuck Baldwin was the presidential candidate from the Constitution Party, which is a traditional conservative third party. And it was a remarkably intelligent debate, unlike the debates that Americans usually see between presidential candidates. In this case, both were discussing content, we're discussing policies, we're discussing facts. It was done in a respectful, civil manner. In a number of fields, a number of important areas, especially to do with our foreign policy, the two candidates, even though they were from the left and the right, were very, very similar to one another. We're in agreement on a lot of major issues. That's the kind of debate most Americans would like to see. They'd like to see a respectful, intelligent debate about these really critical issues facing the United States today. But what we're instead given by the mainstream media and by the two major parties are acrimonious debates that don't really get into content in a significant manner, are full of hyperbole and disrespect for the other half of the political spectrum of our citizenry, and just manage to create this divide in the United States that works so much to prevent us, those of us that really do care about international relations and about our own nation, from joining together the way these third-party movements could sometimes provide.
Well, of course, some of the details that both you, Allison Weir, and Mark Dankoff have talked about, Dave Lindorf, I'd like to get a reaction from you, kind of make it look like there's a chokehold on the system with the Zionist regime, and of course promises that are never really followed through or failed at best. But David Lindorf, I mean, 1 out of 6 Americans today is classified as being poor, and that's unprecedented in the U.S. history. Do you think it has reached a point where some of these mainstay or some of these, the status quo that has been maintained, it's about time that America needs to break out of that through their politicians or what have you? Because we can, in a sense, maybe compare it to what we see people power does in other parts of the world. That is the uprisings that we're noticing when people are so fed up that they, take onto the streets. Your reflection on that?